You mean to tell me that humans deliberately poison themselves with ethanol for recreational purposes? Zixtal's crystalline appendages clinked together in what their human classmates had learned to recognize as extreme distress.
And they survive? Oh, honey, that's not even the half of it, Amber Thompson replied with a laugh, taking another sip of her coffee, her fourth cup that morning. The small group of interspecies medical students had gathered in their usual spot in the hospital's cafeteria, and as always, the conversation had turned to the peculiarities of human physiology.
The Arcturian medical student's crystalline form shifted through various shades of concerned purple. But the chemical composition is technically poison, yeah, Amber confirmed cheerfully. Just like this coffee, and chocolate, and a bunch of other stuff we eat and drink for fun. Speaking of which, Dr. Harrison called out as she approached their table, datapad in hand. We've got an interesting case coming in that I think will be particularly educational for our non-human residents. Trauma bay in 5 minutes. The students quickly gathered their things, Zixtal still making distressed clicking sounds about recreational poisons as they made their way to the emergency department. They arrived just in time to see the paramedics wheeling in a surprisingly cheerful-looking human male. "What have we got?" Dr. Harrison asked, though her barely suppressed smile suggested she already knew, and was looking forward to the alien's reactions.
28-year-old male fell approximately 40 feet while rock climbing, the paramedic reported professionally. Multiple fractures, possible internal bleeding, and "I can taste colors," the patient announced happily, waving at the gathered students with his unbroken arm. "The pain meds are amazing!" Zixtal's entire crystalline form went nearly white with horror.
40 feet. But that's fatal. The impact force alone should have turned me into hamburger meat? The patient supplied helpfully.
Nah, I got lucky. The tree branches broke my fall, and also several bones, but mostly the fall. Dr. Harrison turned to address the gathered students, particularly the non-human ones who were displaying various signs of distress, from Zixtal's rapidly shifting colors to Kavoth's nervous tentacle ringing.
"This is actually an excellent teaching opportunity," she began.
"Human beings have several remarkable adaptations that make us surprisingly difficult to kill. Our skeletal structure is both rigid enough to provide protection and flexible enough to absorb significant impact. We have redundant organs, highly efficient blood-clotting mechanisms, and an almost absurd ability to recover from trauma." But the readings! Kavoth's tentacles were practically tied in knots as they studied their medical scanner. "The blood pressure alone indicates severe systemic shock. And these fracture patterns. How is he even conscious?" "Oh, that's the really fun part," Amber chimed in, earning a stern look from Dr. Harrison. "Sorry, interesting part. Humans have this neat trick where we can basically ignore massive trauma for a while if we need to. Adrenaline's wild stuff. Speaking of which," the patient added cheerfully, "I think mine's wearing off. Everything's starting to hurt a lot more now. Also, is the ceiling supposed to be spinning?" The next few hours were a blur of activity as the medical team worked to stabilize their patient. The alien students watched in fascinated horror as their human colleagues calmly dealt with what, to them, seemed like an impossibly severe set of injuries. "The really interesting thing about human emergency medicine," Dr. Harrison explained as they worked, "is that it evolved from battlefield medicine. Humans have been patching each other up under less than ideal conditions for thousands of years. We've gotten pretty good at it." "Like that time last week," Amber added, "when that construction worker came in with a metal rod through his chest, and he was mostly just annoyed because it was making him late for dinner." "Please don't remind me," Kavoth moaned. "I still have nightmares about that one. The imaging showed it missed his heart by millimeters." "Yeah, humans have this thing called dumb luck that seems to defy all statistical probability," Dr. Harrison said with a small smile. "It's not in any of the textbooks, but you'll see it often enough in emergency medicine." As if to prove her point, their current patient chose that moment to regain full consciousness and immediately tried to check his phone. "Hey, did anyone grab my climbing gear? That stuff's expensive." "Sir," Kavoth's tentacles writhed in disbelief, "you have 3 broken ribs, a fractured femur, internal bleeding, and what should be a fatal amount of trauma. How are you concerned about climbing equipment?" "Oh, this isn't so bad," the patient replied with what he probably thought was a reassuring smile. "You should have seen me after that motorcycle accident last year. Now that was a rough day." Zixtal made a sound like breaking glass and had to excuse themselves from the trauma bay. The next few weeks became an ongoing education in human resilience, as their patient recovered at what the alien students considered an alarming rate. They documented everything in meticulous detail, partly for their medical studies, and partly because no one back home would believe them otherwise. The bone remodeling alone defies everything we know about tissue regeneration, Krathos mentioned during one of their follow-up examinations. It's like watching evolution in fast forward. And the pain tolerance, Zixtal added, having finally recovered from their initial shock. Yesterday he refused additional analgesics because, and I quote, "It only hurts when I laugh, and this show I'm watching isn't that funny anyway." Amber, who had been updating the patient's charts, just grinned. Wait until you see what happens when he starts physical therapy. Humans don't just recover, we usually come back stronger. True to her word, their patient attacked his rehabilitation with what the alien students could only describe as alarming enthusiasm. Where their own species would require months or years of careful recovery, humans seem to operate on an entirely different timeline. It's not just the physical recovery that's remarkable, Dr. Harrison explained during one of their educational sessions. Human psychological resilience is equally impressive. We not only survive things that should kill us, we often treat them as learning experiences and go right back to doing whatever caused the injury in the first place. But why? Krathos asked, genuinely puzzled. Surely the logical response to nearly fatal injury would be to avoid similar situations in the future. You'd think so, Amber laughed. But humans have this weird thing where we see obstacles as challenges rather than warnings. It's like we take survival as personal victory over death itself. It's actually an interesting evolutionary advantage, Dr. Harrison added. This combination of physical resilience and psychological determination helped humans survive and thrive in incredibly diverse and often hostile environments. We're essentially programmed to look at something that almost killed us and think, I bet I could do that better next time. Their patient, who was now doing remarkably well in his physical therapy, was a perfect example of this peculiarly human trait. Not only was he already planning his return to rock climbing, but he was enthusiastically sharing his plans for bigger challenges with anyone who would listen. I'm thinking free solo next time, he announced during one of his checkups, causing Zixtal to emit a high-pitched crystalline shriek. What? I'll be more careful this time? This time? Krathos's tentacles curled in despair. You mean you're actually planning to do this again? Without safety equipment? Well, yeah, he replied as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I mean, I learned a lot from this fall. Now I know exactly what not to do. Dr. Harrison had to excuse herself from the room to hide her laughter at the alien students' expressions of pure horror. As their patient's recovery continued to progress at what the alien students considered an alarming rate, they found themselves developing a new appreciation for human medicine and human patients. I think I finally understand why human medical techs spend so much time on trauma care, Zixtal mentioned during one of their study sessions. When your patients regularly survive things that should be fatal, you need to be prepared for anything. And everything, Krathos added, their tentacles gesturing at their notes. The sheer variety of ways humans find to injure themselves is impressive. That's one word for it, Amber laughed. Wait until you start your rotation in the pediatric ward. Kids are basically indestructible rubber balls with a death wish. The alien students had learned enough about humans by this point to know she wasn't entirely joking. Their education in human resilience reached its peak during their patient's final checkup before discharge. He had not only recovered fully but was, as Amber had predicted, actually stronger in some ways than before his accident. The bone density in your femur has increased by 12% compared to your pre-injury scans, Krathos noted, their tentacles moving in patterns of disbelief as they reviewed the data. That shouldn't be possible. Oh yeah, that happens sometimes, the patient replied casually. Body builds it back stronger where it broke. Pretty cool, right? Cool is not the word I would use, Zixtal muttered, their crystalline form shifting through shades of amazement and concern. Terrifying, perhaps. Impossible, definitely. Welcome to human medicine, Dr. Harrison said with a smile, where impossible is just another Tuesday, and that should have killed you is practically a greeting. As they watched their former patient practically bounce out of the hospital, already talking about his next adventure, the alien students found themselves reflecting on everything they'd learned about human medicine, and humans themselves. You know, Krathos mused, I used to think human medical texts were exaggerating about your species' resilience. Now I think they might have been understating it. Definitely understating it, Zixtal agreed, their crystal structure settling into a pattern that their classmates had learned to recognize as thoughtful. Though I'm still not sure if humans are incredibly brave,
or just have a very poor understanding of mortality. Bit of both, probably, Amber admitted with a grin. But hey, it's worked out pretty well for us so far.
Indeed it has, Dr. Harrison concluded.
And it's why human medical knowledge is becoming so valuable throughout the galaxy. We're not just good at surviving, we're good at helping others survive too. As if to punctuate her point, the emergency department's speakers crackled to life with a new announcement. Incoming trauma, extreme sports accident, multiple casualties, human and non-human. Well, Amber said, already moving towards the trauma bay. Looks like it's time for another lesson in human emergency medicine. The alien students followed, their various appendages either clicking or writhing with nervous energy. They had learned enough about humans by now to know that whatever was coming through those doors would probably defy their understanding of survivable trauma. But they had also learned something else. Something that made them better doctors and gave them a new appreciation for their human colleagues. When it came to saving lives, impossible was just another challenge to overcome. And humans, as they had learned, were very, very good at overcoming challenges. Even if their methods sometimes involved surviving things that, by all reasonable medical science, really should have killed them. 3 weeks later, the same group found themselves gathered around another trauma bay, this time watching as a human teenager was wheeled in, sporting what appeared to be several chemical burns and an expression of mild annoyance. Let me guess, Dr. Harrison sighed, though there was a hint of amusement in her voice. Home chemistry experiment? Advanced placement chemistry, actually, the teen corrected, wincing slightly as the nurses began assessing her burns. We were studying exothermic reactions, and I had this really cool idea about mixing compounds that were explicitly labeled "do not mix," Dr. Harrison finished, raising an eyebrow. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds bad, the teen admitted. But I had a hypothesis. Kavoth's tentacles twisted in what had become their signature expression of human-induced distress. But these burns, the chemical composition. How are you even conscious right now? Oh, it's not that bad, the teenager assured them, then immediately contradicted herself by letting out a sharp hiss of pain as one of the nurses began cleaning the wounds. Okay, maybe it stings a little, but I definitely proved my hypothesis. And what hypothesis was that? Zixtal asked, their crystalline form shifting through various shades of morbid curiosity. That the reaction would be way more awesome than what was in the textbook, she replied with undiminished enthusiasm. And I was right. Did you know that mixture can burn through 3 layers of protective gear? Because I sure didn't. Amber, who had been preparing burn treatment supplies, couldn't suppress a snort of laughter. You know, when I was in high school, I did almost the exact same thing, except with... Perhaps, Dr. Harrison interrupted firmly. We should focus on treatment, rather than trading stories about dangerous chemistry experiments. The next hour was another masterclass in human medical resilience, as they treated burns that, according to Kavoth's medical scanner, should have caused significantly more trauma than their patient was displaying. I don't understand, Zixtal commented as they helped apply regenerative gel to the less severe burns. According to everything we've learned about human physiology, these chemical burns should be causing extreme pain responses. But she's just sitting there, reading something on her phone. Oh, it hurts like hell, the teenager assured them, not looking up from her device. But I'm live tweeting the whole thing. My follower count has doubled in the last hour. Dr. Harrison pinched the bridge of her nose. Please tell me you're not encouraging other students to repeat your experiment. Of course not. I'm using myself as a cautionary tale, the teen protested. Then, after a pause, although I did include my initial calculations, you know, for science. For science, Kavoth repeated faintly. Is that the human phrase that precedes all your near-death experiences? Not all of them, Amber replied cheerfully. Sometimes it's hold my beer, or watch this, or I bet I can... The alien students had learned enough about humans by this point to recognize these as what Dr. Harrison called red flag phrases, human utterances that typically preceded incoming trauma cases. Their education in human resilience continued over the following months, each case seeming to defy their previous understanding of survivable injuries. There was the construction worker who had somehow managed to walk himself to the emergency room after accidentally shooting himself in the leg with a nail gun. I figured I'd save on ambulance fees. The elderly grandmother who had fought off a would-be purse snatcher despite having what turned out to be a broken hip. Nobody's stealing the cookies I just baked for my grandkids.
and the countless sports injuries that their human colleagues treated with what seemed to the alien students like alarming casualness. I think I'm beginning to understand why humans dominated so many Deathworlds during their early space exploration, Kavoth mused one day, as they watched their latest patient, a rugby player with multiple fractures, argue about whether he could return to finish the second half of his game.
Oh?
Zixtal's crystalline form shifted in curiosity. It's not just that they can survive things that should kill them, Kavoth explained, tentacles gesturing expressively. It's that they seem to view survival as some sort of personal challenge, like every near-death experience is just practice.
That's actually a pretty accurate assessment, Amber admitted, though I wouldn't put it quite that way in your official xenobiology thesis.
Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of yet another trauma case, this time involving what the paramedics described as a minor disagreement between a human dockworker and a malfunctioning cargo lifting mech.
Minor?
Zixtal's entire form went practically transparent with disbelief as they read the incoming vital signs.
The impact force alone should have squished me like a bug,
the dockworker finished cheerfully, despite sporting what appeared to be several crushed ribs and a dislocated shoulder. But I showed that rust bucket who's boss. Did manage to save most of the cargo too, though I might have used some language that would make my mother cry. Dr. Harrison, who had been reviewing the initial scans, looked up with an expression that the alien students had learned to recognize as professionally resigned amusement, a common expression among human medical staff.
Sir, she began carefully, are you aware that you have 3 broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and what appears to be a partial collapse of your left lung? Well, that explains the whistling sound when I breathe, the dock worker replied thoughtfully.
But hey, at least I didn't drop the containers with the new hover bikes. Those things are worth more than I make in a year. Kavoth's tentacles performed what Amber had dubbed their human-induced anxiety dance as they processed this information.
You maintained your grip on multiple cargo containers, with a collapsed lung and broken ribs? Adrenaline's a hell of a drug, Amber explained, already preparing for what promised to be another interesting trauma surgery.
Though I have to admit, even by human standards, that's pretty impressive. Had to be done. The dock worker shrugged, then immediately regretted the movement as it jostled his injured shoulder. Ow! Okay, maybe I should have let go after the first impact. But you know how it is. Once you commit to something, you've got to see it through. That, Zixtal declared, their crystalline form shifting through various shades of exasperation, might be the most human thing I've ever heard. Just wait until he starts physical therapy, Dr. Harrison said with a knowing smile.
I guarantee he'll be trying to lift twice the weight he should, probably while telling us about how the accident gave him some great ideas for improving the cargo lifting systems. As if on cue, the dock worker perked up.
Oh yeah, I was thinking, if we modified the hydraulic systems to include a secondary backup that could… Perhaps, Dr. Harrison interrupted gently, we should focus on fixing your current hydraulic systems first, starting with that lung. The following surgery was another testament to human medical ingenuity, as the team worked to repair damage that, according to all of Kavoth's medical training, should have been fatal several times over. What impressed the alien students even more than the human body's resilience was the almost casual efficiency with which their human colleagues approached such severe trauma. It's all about perspective, Dr. Harrison explained as they worked.
Humans have been dealing with these kinds of injuries since before we had proper medical technology. We had to get good at it because, well, she gestured at their current patient, who was already showing signs of wanting to wake up despite the anesthesia.
We just wouldn't stop doing dangerous things. It's like your entire species evolved to be just sturdy enough to survive your own terrible decisions, Zixtal observed, their crystal structure creating patterns that indicated deep thought. That's not entirely inaccurate, Amber admitted as she assisted with the lung repair, though I prefer to think of it as evolving to be adaptable enough to survive our own curiosity. Curiosity. Kavoth's tentacles writhed in disbelief.
Is that what we're calling it now? Well, what would you call it when a species looks at something that almost killed them and thinks, I wonder what would happen if I tried that again, but differently? There was a moment of silence as the alien students considered this, broken only by the steady beeping of medical monitors and the occasional muttered curse from their patient, who was apparently trying to argue with the anesthesia.
Insanity, Kavoth decided finally.
We would call that insanity. And yet, Dr. Harrison pointed out,
It's that very trait that's made humans some of the most successful emergency medical practitioners in the galaxy. When you're used to dealing with patients who survive the impossible, you get very good at making the impossible survivable. As if to demonstrate her point, their patient chose that moment to partially wake up and attempt to give them detailed suggestions about cargo lifting system improvements, despite being theoretically unconscious. "Sir," one of the nurses said with the patient tone of someone who had dealt with this before, "please stop trying to redesign heavy machinery while we're literally holding your lung together." "But I had such a good idea," the dock worker protested groggily. "What if we added a third backup system that runs on—" The rest of his suggestion was lost as the anesthesiologist adjusted his medication levels, but the alien students had seen enough. This, they were learning, was simply how humans approached life and death. "You know what the really scary part is?" Amber commented as they finished the surgery. "He'll probably actually design that improved system while he's recovering. Humans tend to do their best innovation while they're supposed to be resting." "That's because we get bored easily," Dr. Harrison admitted. "And a bored human is far more dangerous than an injured one." The alien students made careful notes about this observation, adding it to their growing collection of things that should kill humans but somehow don't. The list was getting impressively long, as they wheeled their patient to recovery, already making bets on how soon he'd try to sneak back to work. They reflected on everything they'd learned about human medicine, and humans themselves. "I think," Krathos said thoughtfully, their tentacles moving in scholarly patterns, "that the most remarkable thing about humans isn't their physical resilience at all." "Oh?" Zixtal's crystalline form shifted in curiosity. "No. It's their ability to turn near-death experiences into learning opportunities. Every injury is just data for the next attempt." "That's a very diplomatic way of putting it," Amber laughed. "Most of us just call it learning the hard way." "The human way, you mean?" Dr. Harrison corrected with a smile. "After all, why learn from others' mistakes when you can make your own, bigger, more interesting mistakes?" The emergency department speakers crackled to life once again. "Incoming trauma, extreme sports accident, multiple patients, something about a homemade jetpack." And on that note, Dr. Harrison sighed, though she couldn't quite hide her amused smile. "Let's go see what new impossible survival story we're about to witness." The alien students followed, their various appendages moving in patterns that suggested both dread and fascination. They had learned enough about humans by now to know that whatever was coming through those doors would probably redefine their understanding of survivable trauma yet again. But they had also learned something else, something that made them better doctors and gave them a new appreciation for their human colleagues. When it came to saving lives, impossible was just another challenge to overcome. And humans, as they had learned, were very, very good at overcoming challenges, even if their methods sometimes involved surviving things that, by all reasonable medical science, really should have killed them. Because that, more than anything, was the essence of human medicine, making the impossible survivable, one ridiculous injury at a time. The next educational opportunity came sooner than expected, as their emergency department received what Krathos would later describe in their xenomedicine thesis as the most human situation imaginable. "So let me get this straight," Dr. Harrison said, pinching the bridge of her nose as she addressed their newest arrivals. A group of 5 humans in various states of injury, all wearing matching t-shirts that read "Hold my coffee and watch this." "You were attempting to break the world record for most people simultaneously riding a single hoverboard," one of them finished enthusiastically, despite sporting what appeared to be several fractures and a significant amount of road rash. "And technically we did it. For about 3 seconds, another added proudly, holding an ice pack to an impressively swollen knee, "before the gravitational stabilizers gave out." "The video's already got like 500,000 views, a third chimed in, typing on their phone with visibly broken fingers. "Worth it!" Zixtal's crystalline form cycled through so many colors of distress that they briefly resembled a disco ball. But the combined mass, the gravitational forces, the sheer impossibility of— "Oh, the math definitely said it wouldn't work," the apparent ringleader of the group admitted cheerfully. "But math's been wrong before." "Has it, though?" Krathos muttered, their tentacles curling in what Amber had started calling their human-induced existential crisis configuration. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity, as the medical team worked to patch up what Dr. Harrison dubbed the Great Hoverboard Incident of 2025. The alien students watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as their human patients not only remained conscious through procedures that should have been agonizing, but actively participated in planning their next attempt. "See, the problem wasn't the weight distribution," one of them explained while having a dislocated shoulder reset. "It was the power coupling. If we just reinforce it with some, better materials." "Perhaps," Dr. Harrison suggested firmly, "we could focus on healing the current injuries before planning new ones." "Multitasking," the patient replied brightly. "Besides, the cast setting time is perfect for brainstorming improvements." Amber, who was updating patient charts nearby, couldn't suppress her laughter. "You know, this reminds me of my college days. There was this one time when we tried to—" "No trading stunt ideas with the patients," Dr. Harrison called out, though there was a hint of amusement in her voice. The alien students were learning that human medical care wasn't just about treating injuries. It was about managing their patients' seemingly boundless enthusiasm for creating new ones. "I've been analyzing the pattern," Zixtal commented during a brief break. Their crystalline form had settled into what their classmates recognized as their scientific observation configuration. "There seems to be a direct correlation between the severity of the injury and the human's enthusiasm for repeating the experience. It's almost like they're using near-death experiences as peer review," Kavoth added, tentacles moving in scholarly patterns. "That's actually not far off," Amber admitted. "We have this saying, if you're going to be dumb, you better be tough." "But why?" Zixtal's form shifted to a puzzled blue. Surely the logical response to nearly fatal injury would be to avoid similar situations. But then how would we know our exact limits?" A new voice chimed in. It was one of their hoverboard patients, hopping down the hallway on one leg, their other leg in a fresh cast. "Besides, failure is just success in progress." "Sir," Kavoth's tentacles writhed in distress, "you are not cleared to be ambulatory yet." "Oh, this is nothing. Did I ever tell you about the time I tried to—" The story was interrupted by Dr. Harrison's return. "Back to bed," she ordered firmly, "or I'll have to tell them about the rocket-powered skateboard incident of 2024. The patient's eyes lit up. "Now that was a good one. Did you know human hair can actually catch fire at—" "Bed. Now." As they watched their patient hop-shuffle back to their room, still cheerfully narrating various past mishaps, the alien students found themselves developing a new theory about human medicine. "I think I understand now," Kavoth said thoughtfully. "Human medical science isn't just about healing injuries. It's about adapting to your species' apparently unlimited capacity for creating new and interesting ways to get injured." "It's like an arms race," Zixtal added, their crystal structure creating patterns of realization, but between human innovation and human medicine. "And that's why human medical techniques are so valued across the galaxy," Dr. Harrison concluded. "We've had to become extremely good at treating injuries that, by any reasonable standard, shouldn't even be survivable." Their philosophical discussion was interrupted by a new announcement over the emergency department speakers. "Incoming trauma. Multiple patients. Something about attempting to teach a Venusian Venus flytrap to play fetch." "You know," Amber commented as they hurried to prepare for the new arrivals, "I'm starting to think we should add creative problem-solving gone wrong as an official diagnostic category." The alien students followed, their various appendages moving in what had become their standard preparing for human-induced chaos patterns. They had learned enough about humans by now to know that whatever was coming through those doors would probably add several new entries to their things that should kill humans but somehow don't list. But they had also learned something else. Something that made them better doctors and gave them a new appreciation for their human colleagues. When it came to saving lives, impossible was just another challenge to overcome. And humans, as they had learned, were very, very good at overcoming challenges. Even if their methods sometimes involved surviving things that, by all reasonable medical science, really should have killed them. Because that, more than anything, was the essence of human medicine. Making the impossible survivable, one ridiculous injury at a time. And somehow, against all logic and probability, it worked. Just like everything else humans did. The end.